p.m. It's Wednesday, December the 8th. 24 days left for 2021, if you're counting. And today's program is going to be interesting. First of all, we have the Ministry of Education, which has a regular feature looking at how we're going to advance this crucial sector of national life. That's a regular starting feature for the public eye. And then starting at about 1:45, I remember we're on the same time zone as our friends in New York at Arijam, who will join us by then. We're going to invite two retired prime ministers of Jamaica, Percival James Patterson and Bruce Golding. Yes? We're talking about the Constitution of Jamaica. We're talking about that guiding principle that is supposed to be the foundation of all laws. And there's a sense, as we come close to our 60th anniversary of independence, that's next year, that we should be looking at it more closely. And who better to offer advice, to offer process than those two gentlemen, as well as to whatever we can, the two of us here. I want to say to you, too, that the example of Barbados, although we are not copycat people, certainly has played a role, a distinctive role, in reactivating the discussion for change in the Jamaican Constitution. So we want to ask, why should Jamaica become a republic? Why should we tell Mrs. Queen goodbye? Is this the right time? And what else will we do if we embrace Republican change? And if we do, are we going to do like what Prime Minister Motley of Barbados did, to take one of our own entertainers and elevate them to national hero? Or is it two separate things? It really is, So plenty of discussion, and you can call in. Please do. The WhatsApp and text line is 876-551-5782, and the studio line is 876-676-4996. Welcome, sir.
Well, are you welcoming me again? I would say continuing.
Continuation, yes. This morning, Pearnel and I had a very interesting discussion on Early Rise, the program that we do together between 5 and 7 on Mondays to Wednesdays on the bridge with the Reverend Dr. Craig Brown.
Yes.
I think you got the picture of this short-foot man, come from Whitehall Avenue, went to the great St. George's College,
yeah,
and then migrated to become a successful financial manager, but also to become the leader of a very significant religious congregation, evangelistic congregation in New York. And then to put all of that to the service of Jamaica through this foundation,
yes,
called Zion Care International.
And want to do much more.
And
it's vexed if you don't get a chance to do it.
And
so
yes.
I'm spending some of my time today.
Yes.
As I promised him.
Yes.
To have discussion and to see
if we can clear a path
to see if
for him.
To see when.
Yes. That
because
can happen.
This certainly, I know Chris very well.
Sure, Chris Tufton you're referring to. And he's a man of goodwill.
I'm yet to hear him say no.
Oh yes.
Yes.
That's not necessarily a virtue.
I think he wouldn't be too.
Ask any lady.
I think he'll be too obsessed that he should say no to.
Yeah.
I think he will be too upset if I tell you quickly one of the things.
Yeah.
They have an advertisement on the vans that go around advertising. Please
get vaccinated.
Get vaccination. Uh-huh. And there's a lady in it that is getting the job.
Getting the job.
And her face, her facial expression is such pain that I say, Chris,
take her off.
Take that off.
No, it's true.
She should be smiling.
Yeah.
That turn off. And that's so painful. Me no want it.
I'll go there.
And Chris is so nice. Him say thank you.
Yes.
And I'm going to look into it right away.
Yes.
And then there are a few other little things and I called him, and he called me back, and I said, you're revolutionizing this thing, to call a minister on a cabinet day and have him call you back in 20 minutes. very
it means he
important.
has regard for you,
Yeah.
and he has that respect, and that is what it can't be done all the time. We all face that, but it is extremely important that that happens. That correspondence be acknowledged
Yes.
and be acted upon, especially when it is for the good of our people, and
Yes.
where somebody's offering to give you something. So I enjoyed that conversation. I want to emphasize it as we begin the public eye today with the agenda we've told you of, because we want, this is precisely the things that happen on the bridge, is it not?
Yes.
Where Jamaicans, and as Dr. Brown told us, people who are not Jamaicans, but just enthused by the odyssey of helping our people.
Yeah.
Even people who don't check for the religious persuasion
Yes.
of Christianity, nonetheless coming and giving
Yeah.
at their own cost. Yeah?
And
To me,
call-
that's greatly important.
And call it running. Call it. There's a strong bond
Yeah,
between the Jamaicans
Yeah.
who have left here.
yeah,
And sometimes we used to say, but why school them? And as you school them, they migrate.
yeah,
And then I went to Canada, as I told you earlier, and saw that Singapore, I think Singapore has a special position in the embassy for somebody searching for jobs.
Oh,
Mexico,
uh-huh.
so that is the portfolio, you know.
Yeah.
Go to every factory, go to every government, search for jobs.
Yep.
And we were waiting until the farmers called us that they need.
Well,
and I'm sure something has been done.
I
because
hope so. I don't know.
Yeah,
but
man, yes, I
Let me,
can
let
tell
me
you.
ask you this. Two questions. PJ Patterson has often said to me that we may have to take a decision. We should take a decision that we train our people to work abroad. Some of them, yes. It is the history of our country, you know, so. From the days after slavery, from the Panama Canal, from sugarcane cutting in Cuba, yes, all through, right through to when we went to post-war Britain, into the United States in previous and subsequent eras, Canada, all over the world. We must accept that we are a world-class people, but we have to ensure that we get benefit from those who we train and send abroad.
But hold on. What I'm trying to say to you that Mexico and
Yeah.
Panama are making an industry.
Yeah. Make it an industry.
Yeah.
Listen here, Bridge Nation, you hear what Pearnel is saying?
Right.
Make it an industry.
What it means is to say, in this term, I'm training 500 persons directly for hospitals.
Yeah,
Now, I'm using Jamaican on the training.
yeah,
I train them for hospital. You know what happened? They are going to send back
yeah,
money that make our budget
yeah.
and help. You know,
Okay, but this
we,
has to
we
be
will
intent-
never be able to find jobs for all who we're training.
Very well. So this has to be intentional. It is existential. It's happening.
Yes.
But then we have to adapt our standards and to get over some of the emotional hang-ups that we have about these matters.
Listen, man, I don't know what the emotional hang-up is. If you can't take care of people, we train a lot of people who just graduate and go home with them certificate, go cry. When if we knew that in Canada, the hospitals want more nurses,
Yeah.
and we train 500 at UE,
Yeah.
500 at NCU, and we don't have enough space for 1,500 nurses
Sure.
all over the place. What the hell are we waiting for? These schools are begging us
Well, then, you know,
to send them 800,
yeah. So,
and those people are going to take care of Jamaica.
sure. So we need to ask ourselves, why is this not happening, and how can we remove the obstacles? I've told you the story of how difficult it is to remove those obstacles. But that's the first thing. We have to accept that some of our people, many of our people, are going to be migratory. The second question follows from that, though, sir. How do we recognize them? I remember Senegal. I met some people from there once at a conference,
yes.
and they they have 3 large diaspora communities in the rest of Africa, in France because of their colonial background, and in the United States. And they reserve 3 positions in their Senate for diaspora representation.
Yes.
Yes. Should we do the same?
Well, my father used to have a word that is too fala fashion. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know follow fashion.
But the point
Well,
is,
no man follow fashion if it's good.
no, exactly.
Yeah,
It's a good thing
yeah,
to make the connection and make those abroad feel that they are part of us. In fact, the man who registered to vote in Jamaica
right.
and his registration is valid, and he's in America or any part, and election is called, and he is in Jamaica on election day, he votes.
Of course.
Now, what he's asking for, do I have to come to Jamaica to vote?
Yeah,
People in Jamaica who are American citizens vote in Jamaica.
yes.
And,
Through the embassy.
Through the embassy.
Yes.
So there are a lot of things that other
So-
people do that we can decide
follow
whether or
fashion.
not we want to.
We can follow fashion.
We can follow fashion.
Okay, sir. So a last question now before I introduce our feature on education, because this is going to touch constitutional reform.
Yes.
I left a motion in your parliament that said we need to get rid of this requirement that you can't be an American citizen and a Jamaican parliamentarian at the same time. That was, but you can be a Canadian citizen, you can be a Pakistani citizen, you can be anywhere from the British Commonwealth. Stay a year and turn Prime Minister of Jamaica. Foolishness,
It
Mr.
is.
Charles.
It is rubbish. In
Yeah,
fact,
no, consensus.
no, but I agree.
Of course.
I had
You had a green card?
I had a green card,
Yes.
and in 1980, I voluntarily
Eternity.
walked to the, before it was
Yes, yes.
fashionable to do so.
Yes.
And I said to the American ambassador, I want to thank you
Yes.
for the opportunity
Yes.
of going to America, spend some time there,
Study.
and studied, and I come back and I maintained my green card for about 10 years.
Yes.
And now I am going to run election to represent people.
Yes.
And I think I need to say thank you.
Yes.
And turn back. Ronnie, there were a crowd of people there.
So what a fool.
And when I gave the man the green card, and he wished me well,
Yeah.
and didn't think I need to do it, but I told him thanks. A woman got up and said, Mr. Charles, oh, you wicked, so what I do? Me, I try to get a green card. For
And you
years,
and you
and
take
you
it
get
and-
one and come get it back.
Come get it back.
Yeah, wicked. And I never forget that.
On that notion, in the first half of the program today, Acting Chief Education Officer in the Ministry of Education, Dr. Kassan Troop, along with Assistant Chief Education Officer, Dr. Clover Hamilton Flores, and Assistant Chief Education Officer for Media Services, Ms. Nadine Sims, will join us for Educate Jamaica, a feature every Wednesday. These ladies are going to speak about the Jam Learning app, accessing curriculum support resources, and the curriculum implementation support tools offered so necessarily, so urgently at this time by the Ministry of Education. This is a Public Eye on the Bridge 99 FM, and there's nothing more important. No sector of social and economic life that is more significant than education. And so we welcome this feature, Educate Jamaica. And we welcome Dr. Clover Hamilton Flowers, the Assistant Chief Education Officer, and Ms. Nadine Sims also. And to hope that Dr. Kassan Troop can join us. And ladies, as I bid you good afternoon, may I tell you that you have to meet the Honorable Pearnel Charles. He is an absolute middle-aged sweet boy, and he's very interested in education as well. Hello and welcome. Tell us about the activity of the media services in what are admittedly very difficult times for education in Jamaica.
Yes, the COVID-19 pandemic provided us with challenges as well as opportunities. One of the opportunities that came out of this experience is that we were able to develop audiovisual learning support for our students. So, for example, the Ministry of Education now has 2 dedicated channels, one for the primary level and one for the secondary level, where audiovisual content or videos are produced that for different grade levels.
These are cable channels?
Yes. So, for example, the channels, it's on Flow 141 for the primary.
141 primary, yes.
Right. And 140 for the secondary.
Okay, so I can go to school then if I miss my virtual class, or even if I need to review or make up. There's a program that has probably allows me to make up my subjects on cable television. Many people have that. Cable 141 for primary and 140 for secondary.
Yes, that's correct. As well as we also have a partnership with CBCJ.
Yes.
Yes, so that content is available 24/7.
Okay, so
as well as on Digiplay, Channel 6.
Channel 6 on Digiplay.
That's correct,
And
sir.
did you say something about Flow?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Well, I repeated what it was for Flow for the different
for the
stations.
different stations. That was it. Now, this is Pearnel. I never knew this, and
Well-
I think that's a great step forward, eh?
Well, had I known this, I would be very much more restricted in my prediction
Yes.
that we're going to lose nearly 2 years, because can these programs be repeated?
Miss Sims?
Yes, sir. The 24-hour, 7-day channel. So, of course, we play new content between 7:30 to about 2, and then it is looped again, sir. So
Okay.
the content is available.
And
As well as, may I add that there's the MOEYI Jamaica YouTube channel as well, where persons can go ahead and access content.
okay, but accessing content helps, but I need to know which one I really need and somebody to guide me. How does that happen?
Okay, so we have a schedule. We have a TV schedule that is sent out to the system. So you would know, for example, what content.
When you say
what
sent out to
grade level.
when you say sent out to the system, what do you mean, Miss?
It is sent to the school's bulletin as well as other communication channels, the ministries, educate.gov.jm. It's a space where we house all educational resources to support the curriculum.
Give us again. Educate.
Educate.gov.jm.
.jm. Okay.
Right, so
And
that's the-
there, if I can access that website, it means that I can hear what programs are going to be on, what subjects, and at what level,
And if you missed it when it is being
and when
repeated,
it is being repeated.
That's correct, sir.
Miss,
would the headmasters in schools announce these to children?
well, yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
It
and-
is sent to the ministry network, communication
Yeah.
network, to the school's bulletin, and there's the DPK help desk, and through the social media.
Help
information.
us with the acronyms. They said a DPK help set. What's that?
Oh, it's that help desk whereby persons can call in if they're having any challenges.
Yes.
Yes, information is available there.
Good. Is Dr. Hamilton Flowers nearby?
Yes, Dr. Flowers.
Yes. Is she nearby?
Yes, she's on the platform, sir.
Hi, Dr. Hamilton Flowers. How are you? She's not hearing us yet. Okay, Miss Nadine, let's go ahead with you while we try and connect her. I need to ask. There are large numbers of students who ought to be making use of these platforms, but they don't have a device, so they're not connected with their school. Minister herself has acknowledged that, and what we all know, and that it's really tens of thousands who are just adrift. How do we address them? How can we publicize? Well, you're doing it now, and we're very grateful to be that medium. But we really need to publicize these opportunities very much more widely. Do you think?
With and this is a public education opportunity for us.
I think so.
Educate
Jamaica.
every Jamaican about what is available.
Yes, and it's also available for parents as well, eh?
That's correct, sir. We cater for parents. So,
Yes.
for example, if our parents access the educate.gov.jm platform,
Yeah.
there is a category for our parents.
Yes.
So, for example, if there is need for psychosocial support, there are various hotlines that our parents can access, and they also have access to the curriculum resources that they can follow along. Those parents who want to homeschool their children. There are also learning kits available for our students to have access to content.
Okay, now this program you see and this station is supported by a large diaspora audience, and I'm just thinking, you know, Miss Nadine Pearnel, that there are lots of parents abroad who have gone up to earn some more money working there. For one reason, their children are back here. They need to know of these, so we're glad that we have this opportunity to promote it, because they need to fit in. In other words, rather than just telephone and say, have you done your homework? Yes? There is the opportunity now for me to say, did you see the lesson on channel 141 about so-and-so, and to keep up to date with them and learn for themselves, don't you think?
Wonderful opportunity.
Yes.
So
This is
partnership.
Yes.
This is a great backup
Yes.
for what I personally
Yes.
believe was a vacuum.
Yes. Yes.
If they, you know, people certainly would agree, and maybe many of the organizations around Jamaica that are serving you in other areas can make a little advertisement in this. Listen to this.
I would
if
have
you
thought
miss
so.
this.
Yes. And
you know,
I'm anxious to know that the content of these portals.
Yes.
These are put together by experienced teachers, grade teachers. They would be aligned to whatever grade is being promoted, and the subjects.
Yes, sir. Just to say that the content, it's aligned to the national standard curriculum.
Uh-huh.
And it's approved and quality assured by our curriculum specialist.
Yes.
And I'm not sure if Dr. Troop is here, but she can speak further to that.
I haven't heard Dr. Troop's voice or Dr. Hamilton Flowers. I'm so sorry.
Dr. Flowers.
Is
I
she?
think Dr. Flowers is here.
I'm here now. Are you hearing me?
Hi, Doctor. Fine, Doctor. Glad to have you with us. Hope you can hear us well, Dr. Clover. Pearnel Charles and myself are anxious to know all of the resources available to educators to access curriculum support. And Nadia has been telling us of all of the virtual ones. Do you consider, you're an expert in the field, do you consider that these are adequate? Do they take the place of face-to-face education, Dr. Hamilton Flowers, or do we still have a way to go?
Okay, so if I'm to talk about face-to-face as opposed to virtual, we know that we're talking about two different contexts altogether. So we can never ever fully benefit from what happens in a face-to-face in a virtual space, but at least we can compensate where there are some deficiencies.
Yes.
So we would still want to be encouraging a blended approach. Nothing beats being able to interact physically with persons, you know, especially when we're talking about our young children.
Uh-huh.
And we're also hearing them crying out that they really want to be in that physical space with their peers.
Sure.
You know, and we want to be mindful about that.
So let's understand now. The only reason that we're supporting a blended approach is because of the threat of COVID. But as soon as that is diminished,
I can't give up this running. There are a lot of things, and I'm going to talk about that one morning.
Uh-huh.
There are a lot of things that this COVID has brought on
Yeah.
that I wouldn't like to see us lose again.
No, but I don't want people to get accustomed to thinking that they can stay away from school and and pick up anything, everything.
The right set of parents will use that to back up what they are getting in school. There's some additional thing that come on it that they don't get in school.
Is Mr. Charles correct, Dr. Flowers?
Well, guess what? It's important for us to recognize that technology is not going to be on the decline, but will be advancing. And we want to make sure that our children are able to handle the development in those areas. Remember, too, we're preparing our learners for this entire world. We're not limiting our Jamaicans to be able to work only in the local setting. We have cases of our young people even working in online spaces to provide services. And we want to ensure that they are ready to handle that they are competitive enough when we speak about the expertise that they bring to the surface, to the table.
Okay, now hold on there, because that's a very important point that Mr. Charles and I were canvassing before you came on. That from what you're saying, it sounds as if you are already recognizing that we are training people at a level that will make them competitive anywhere in the world.
Right.
Got you?
If I go back to our national standards curriculum, we would notice that one of our aims is to help our learners to become lifelong learners, and also for them to be able to function in a global context.
Yes.
Which we know is very, very dynamic.
Okay, but I have a
for us, you know.
Yes, have a big
really
issue.
To help us to move forward
Right.
with some of the plans we already had on the table.
Yes.
Because ICT integration in education has always been on the table.
It's been a gradual move, but
It literally forces us now to pay keen attention to this.
Yes, you know, I think we're understanding better, and very, very indebted to you for telling us of these opportunities. You really have turned your hand, make fashion. But you know, Miss Nadine, Dr. Clover, the deficit of whether it's 2 years or 18 months, as Mr. Charles is questioning, the issue is more than just an academic loss. You know, I am deeply worried, as I think all of us are, about the social deficit. What can we do now to reorient those children who have been out of the disciplined, ordered, relational context of school for so long? You can't just put them back in the classroom or in a blended environment.
Just to add to that, Ronnie, there are thousands of mothers, and as a mother, because some can't find the papa.
Yeah.
The mother have one around her waist and holding one to school, who depend on that face-to-face to train the picnic for them.
Yes. So
and so that is why I'm so excited about face-to-face.
Yeah. Well, now I want to hear what the ministry knows this, and I'm just anxious how you think we can catch up on that side of development. What you say, ladies?
Okay, so let me share with you what we have been doing, and if we can get the support of the entire to help all students, we will begin to make inroads. For example, we analyzed the curriculum and we pulled from the curriculum what we would call some essential objectives. We have also been paying keen attention to those objectives that would speak to character development, dealing with attitudes and values, you know, those aspects of students' development. Now, in order to ensure that we are not overwhelming the child, overwhelming families now with a whole lot of content, we made that decision to say, okay, when you're organizing for learning, ensure that you pay attention to some critical aspects of education. We want to make sure our learners are having enriching experiences, those that will be concentrating a lot on values and attitude, nurturing them emotionally, socially, spiritually. We also want you to be paying attention to their physical development. We can't forget that the body and the soul, they work together. So take care of the physical aspect as well. And be mindful that we can use projects to help our learners to begin to problem solve, prepare them for a newer perspective of work, that even to do what I'm expected to handle as a learner is treated as work. So learning how to work with each other, work even in your family situation. So make sure your R&T area is accounted for, and we are not forgetting the creative side of learning. Our music is important, our drama is important, and make sure the classical areas now are integrated in everything that we're doing. If we begin to pay attention to the whole child, make use of the systems that we have put in place, where, for example, parents can get the help of the National Parenting Support Commission. They can get the help at the school level by being actively involved in what we call our curriculum implementation teams, where they too have voices, student leaders have voices, and we all work together as a community. We will make some significant strides.
Let me ask you the hardest question finally. We really appreciate what you are doing, and it's Herculean. But bearing in mind the fact that probably close to 200,000 of our children have been out of the loop, you don't think we need to do over the year, Dr. Flowers, Ms. Sims?
Okay. Remember, our curriculum is spiral.
Is what, please?
Well, it is a spiral curriculum. So there are some things that you would repeat. There are some aspects of it you will do over as you make progress to another grade level. There is also an approach to education that we have been paying attention to, and that is to profile the learner. And this is why, for example, we encourage schools to make use of what we call diagnostic assessment.
Who does that?
So the ministry would have provided instruments and opportunities for diagnostic assessment based on the national curriculum, but schools are also encouraged to make use of diagnostic assessment to understand what is it the students already are able to do and where they're seeing gaps.
You know, time has caught up with us. We're going to make up to you for the 15 minutes where we had technology problems. But
Yes, sir.
I'm hoping that next time we meet on Educate Jamaica, we can really investigate more deeply how we're going to catch up on the emotional, social, cultural, physical side.
One word, Ronnie.
Yes?
Parent teachers
Yes.
throughout Jamaica, particularly in the rural areas, need face-to-face.
Yes.
They need to tell them,
Yes.
when you go home,
Yes.
this is on there, this is on there.
Well,
watch your children. Parent Teachers Association.
Sound wisdom for another period. We do apologize for the difficulty of this program, but it has turned out we've got a lot of vital information. Thank you so much, Dr. Clover Hamilton Flowers.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Ms. Nadine Sims. And
You're welcome.
we hope that we'll have Dr. Troop on another occasion. It's been Educate Jamaica on the Public Eye, on the Bridge, 99 FM. This is the Public Eye on the Bridge 99 FM. I'm Ronnie Thwaites. The Honorable Pearnel Charles is with me, co-hosting today. The Constitution of Jamaica is the fundamental document that guides all other laws, that should guide so many aspects of our governance and our personal behavior. We formed it in 1962. It's now 2021. We're nearing the 60th anniversary of our independence. The issue of constitutional reform is in the air once again, and it's our great privilege to welcome two retired prime ministers for discussion this afternoon on just that topic. The Bridge 99 to the world. P.J. Patterson would have been on the fringes of the formation of the entire Constitution.
But there's one point in the Constitution that is giving us trouble, you know.
Which is what?
The referendum.
Well, okay, let's get to that.
Yeah, Barbados didn't have any referendum.
But I also want to credit Bruce Golding because he piloted, you will remember,
Yeah.
the significant reform of the Charter of Rights
Yes.
during his term as Prime Minister.
Yes.
And therefore we're locating them as being the most involved and wisest voices
Yes.
on the issue right now. Please tell us when we have the audio straight, please. Yes, not getting any signals from our studio. Wish we could. Yes, who's listening?
Yes. Bruce was upfront with it, and I'm sure maybe would have done it by now, you know, if he was still there.
But the areas of reform are manifold. Whenever anything goes wrong in the national polity, the tendency of people is to say we should change the Constitution.
Well, I'm not one of those, because the Constitution gives us the right to seek the people to create a parliament of parliamentarians to do their business.
Yeah, Mr. Charles, but you know...
But then you are saying, although they elect me and you to go to parliament to do this, for us to take a very important step as becoming a republic, we have to go back to them to tell us what we are to do.
No doubt.
So it's that their decision, not ours.
No doubt our guest will tell us why that particular
I am interested to hear
feature
that.
is there.
Yes,
but
yes.
I'm interested in another fundamental question.
Yes.
Has the Westminster Model Parliament outlived its usefulness to the Jamaican people?
Put it this way. All of what used to be needs to be revived, need to be redeveloped, need to grow.
What does that
You
mean?
and I were boys, and we moved from grade 1 to grade 6 to CXC.
No. All right. But how does that help me about the Constitution? Or there are people listening to us all over the world who are itching and troubled.
The
because
Constitution will be 60 years.
Yeah.
And most things over that period has changed or developed
So therefore,
an addition.
so therefore, we need to look at
We
fundamental
need
reform.
fundamental part of it. But we look at part of it under the Charter of Rights.
We have to some extent. This discussion was triggered by a letter that former Prime Minister P.J. Patterson wrote
Yes.
to Prime Minister Holness and Opposition Leader Mark Golding last week, imploring them. He used very strong and effective language, didn't he?
Yes.
To say it is time now that before our 60th anniversary of independence, we should make decisive steps towards ending our dominion status, where Queen Elizabeth remains the Queen of Jamaica, and where in fact we have a Republican status and a president of our own. And a very important point that he makes is that our present constitution, although it applies, is in fact signed by an official of the Colonial Office and is an order in council of Her Majesty the Queen, whereas we need a constitution which is enacted and adopted in all of its aspects by the Parliament and people on behalf of the people of Jamaica. The concern that many of those reacting to that plea is either support, which certainly we form part of, but also there are those, Pearl, who are saying, why at this time, why is it necessary, how much more butter is this going to put on my bread? Isn't it just cosmetic? And what about the other major reforms that are needed in the Constitution?
I have a simple answer to that. When I started my journey that I was responsible for, we were not independent. And somebody did ask me what independent was going to bring. Now, has becoming an independent makes us different? Of course, a total different country.
Some would say the worst.
Well, so if you want to look on the worst part, you'll find worse. You want to look on the good part, you'll find more good than worse, or bad. But the point is this, that we are not going to find any system that wipes out all the bad things and create only good things. But we are going to move forward.
Okay, and I believe that. But I can also resonate with the impatience, particularly among persons of limited opportunity and means who are saying, look, could you please do something substantial rather than something ephemeral?
Yes, but Ronnie, they said the same thing for independence.
They did.
Yes.
And I accept that.
And I will tell you, even if it is psychological, it's part of our development. A lot of people say, psychology can't eat, psychology don't do this and this.
I'm playing devil's advocate with you because I obviously agree. But I think it's very important that when we are able to connect with these gentlemen, that we look not only at the important structural steps, albeit largely symbolic, but also we open the door to a kind of study, prospect of further reform. And not just further reform, Honorable Pearnel Charles, but rather a reform that tends to bring us on crucial issues closer together, rather than being adversarial, which won't in fact take us anywhere good.
I like to look back on my early 9, 10,
I think we may
11
have
years.
Prime Minister Patterson. Can you hear us now, Sir PJ? Coming much better now.
Yes, okay. A diamond jubilee is very special, whether it is in a marriage or whether it is in the history of a nation. I think our diamond jubilee deserves something special. And having agonized about it, I thought there were two things we could do to make this diamond jubilee a special and memorable one.
That's 6th of August, 2022.
That's correct. The first is to bring home the Constitution of Jamaica. Let it rest on the decision of a sovereign parliament, unlike the present one, which exists on the basis of an order in council granted at Buckingham Palace, which brought our constitution into existence on the appointed day. It was laid before the table of our house on the 29th of July 1962, when we were still an independent country.
Yes.
So that
Dependent.
in strict legal theory, if the Privy Council were to withdraw that order in council,
The English Privy Council.
that's correct, we would have a constitution founded on sand. We want to build a constitution founded on a solid rock passed by the sovereign government of Jamaica.
That itself is a huge lesson. I don't think the majority of our listeners understood how fickle that foundation is. So really, we have not, as a people and as a government, as an independent people, really adopted and hugged up, validated the Constitution.
We have adopted it, but we have not legislated it.
Yes.
It is not founded on a decision of a sovereign Jamaica.
Yes.
That's my first point.
Yes.
My second point is to appoint a head of state which represents the image of Jamaica, the symbol of Jamaica, portrays the identity of Jamaica. The highest office and the final repository of authority for and on behalf of an independent Jamaica. We have made considerable progress based on a commission report by Mr. James Carr, which was considered by a parliamentary committee. And they agreed that we would move towards a Republican form of government where the head of state would be chosen by the parliament. The only question was, should it be done by 2/3 of both houses sitting together or both houses sitting separately? To get directly to it, I tried to achieve that somewhere around the 40th anniversary. When Mr. Seaga and myself met at Bay Royal, he said he was in support of going that route, but Mr. Bruce Golding had just re-entered the party and had expressed some different ideas about the separation of powers and whether we should have what is more or less a presidential system. And he would have to sort that out within his party before he could sign off. I accepted that for two reasons. One, the political it was unpractical for me to go the route where I would not get a 2/3 majority in the Senate, because I would have to obtain a 3/5 majority in a referendum. 60% of the people would have to be voting in favor. And no political party has ever been able to achieve that in any election. So it really will be an exercise in futility. But even more important than that, granted our experiences in the 1980s, I was determined to try and see if we could proceed on the basis of national consensus. And I thought, therefore, Mr. Seaga should be afforded the time to reconsider with his party, and then we would have a sign-off. Well, Mr. Seaga departed as the leader since then, shortly after, for reasons well known by Mr. Charles and Mr. Golding. When Bruce replaced him, even before he became leader of the opposition constitutionally, but he was already leader of the Jamaica Labour Party, we met at Vale Royal. And I asked him what was his position. And he said to me, he had just been appointed. He had set up a committee chaired by Senator Thwaites to look on the proposals for the way forward, and he would have to get some time to consider that report. Well, I departed soon after, and nothing has happened since.
Let me ask. Thank you for the history, sir. Not to cut you. Bruce Golding, can you hear us?
Yeah, I'm hearing you, but I'm hearing you on cell phone.
Thanks very much for joining us, and thanks for your patience, Bruce. You've heard PJ's account. What's your reaction to that? Do you concur?
Well, yeah, to a large extent, yes. But let us look very quickly at where we are now. Since the discussions, the deliberations in the early 1990s, and a substantial area of agreement was arrived at. On 3 elements have been advanced. In 1999, when PJ was still there, we removed the power of the Governor General to deprive us of his Jamaican citizenship if he had acquired citizenship from another country, because that had put the entire diaspora at risk. And then in 2010-11, as you were there, the Charter of Fundamental Rights was enacted. And then in 2015, the Constitution was further amended to make provisions for the local government system. Now, if you take out those 3, there is still a substantial body of agreement that has to be implemented. But there are also critical elements on which there is substantial agreement, but there are some issues that still need to be sorted out. And I want to mention those. If we become a republic, you have to have a president, no?
Yes.
And we had a discussion as to how that president ought to be selected. Now, and I think PJ spoke to this recently, the government at the time wanted a two-thirds majority of both houses sitting together. We insisted that there should be 2/3 of each house voting separately. If they sat together, for example, in the current dispensation, the government would have a majority, a 2/3 majority in a joint system. We believe it is important for the opposition for the support of the opposition to be required in choosing the president. I think PJ indicated that that is something that should not pose a great obstacle, but it's something that we have to discuss and pick up. There are a couple of other issues, and there are important. We had agreed that appointment to critical positions, such as the Chief Justice, the President of the Court of Appeal, the members of the Judicial Services Commission, the members of the Police Service Commission, the Public Defender, the Contractor General, and the independent members of the Electoral Commission. We had agreed that those would be appointed by the Governor General after consultation with the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition. There was, however, disagreement as to the role of the Parliament in relation to these appointments. We propose that the appointment be subject to a 2/3 majority in each house, whereas the PNP at the time argued that the appointment should be deemed to be confirmed unless there is a negative resolution approved by a 2/3 majority in either of the two houses of Parliament. I don't think that that is an insurmountable problem. I believe that we should be able to resolve that. Another area of disagreement had to do with the method of appointment of members of the Public Service Commission. The PNP wanted to retain the current arrangement where the appointment is made by the head of state of the Governor General on the advice of the Prime Minister after consultation with the leader of the opposition. That is what exists now. We felt that it should be dealt with in the same way that the other commissions, the Judicial and Police Commission, would be dealt with. That's something that we would need to discuss. The PNP felt at that time that the Public Service Commission was too integral to the functioning of the executive, and therefore they held that position. Now, apart from that, there are issues on which there is no disagreement. Entrenchment in the Constitution of Electoral Commission, Contractor General, Citizens Protection Bureau. Entrenched provisions for the impeachment of public officials. The requirement that only citizens of Jamaica are eligible in Parliament. The requirement that the power of the Prime Minister to call general elections must be subject to the existence of a voters list that has been updated within the last 6 months. The limiting the number of parliamentarians that can be appointed to ministerial positions. The right of the Chief Justice to sit in the Court of Appeal instead of the current arrangement where he can only do so on the invitation of the President of the Appeals Court. Provisions to empower individuals and organizations to challenge the actions of government without having to obtain the consent or the faith of the Attorney General, where this is done on public interest grounds, and to widen local standards to facilitate class action suits. And also express provision for the Director of Public Prosecution to be subject, the decisions of the Director of Public Prosecution to be subject to judicial review. Now, if you allow me just before I go, to indicate a couple of things. I hope that in the initiative that the Prime Minister has just announced, I hope we don't start from scratch all over again. Otherwise, TJ and I will be long gone before any movement takes place. A considerable amount of work was done. Some of the best minds were brought to the table. Dust off the report, look at what was agreed, look at what is outstanding, and unless there's some compelling reason to revisit it, let us try and resolve those and move on. The other concern that has to be addressed is there are a number of issues there that will require a referendum, no? And therefore, it would be good if we could resolve those so that we have one referendum. A referendum is an expensive business, over $1 billion, so that we could put all of those referendum issues to the people. The Prime Minister suggested that the question of the Buggery law be put to a referendum. He had indicated that the CCJ should be put to a referendum. I don't know to what extent those are cast in concrete positions. I'm not sure myself that a referendum is the best way of dealing with those particular issues.
Clearly not.
Take the CCJ, for example. When PJ tried to get it through Parliament, one of the concerns that Mr. Thiaga expressed at the time was that this was a brand new court. I mean, we had problems with it, you know. The initial proposals would have left the court subject to political interference. That was dealt with. There was also concern about the sustainability of the court in terms of its financing. That was dealt with. A trust fund was...
Yes, we remember.
...a contribution, and that trust fund, as far as I know, is still fairly robust. Now, Mr. Thiaga had suggested that because this court is brand new, you have no track record to go on other than the personal track record of the individual jurors.
That's different now.
He suggested that we watch and see how the court operates over a 10-year period.
Mm-hmm.
See now what is the quality of its decisions.
Yes.
Now, the court has been in operation now for 15 years, I believe.
And shown good quality.
Well, I checked it this morning. They have handed down 243 decisions in their appellate jurisdiction,
yes,
and 33 in the original jurisdiction,
yes,
which is a fairly good amount of work.
Yes.
I mean, 2018 was the best year when they handed down 31 decisions in the appellate jurisdiction.
So what you say?
And quite frankly, I have looked at some of the decisions.
Yeah.
Not all. I mean, I couldn't do that. I am no lawyer, but I mean, having spent sufficient time making laws, I read them, and I am, first of all, I am satisfied in terms of the quality of the decisions and the way in which the decisions were crafted and explained. That's one.
Good show.
Two, I haven't heard anybody challenge the decisions on the basis of them being ill-advised. That in a particular case as well, I don't know. So it's an issue that I believe we ought to see whether we can move our minds from the kind of rigid position that may have existed before to see whether or not we can come to some kind of understanding on that.
Bruce, hold on for a minute. That's very expansive. Sir PJ, Bruce is taking the issue of constitutional reform far beyond the limited start that you had suggested in your letter to Messrs. Holness and Golding. Do you agree that that's involved? And just incidentally, have you had any reply from either Prime Minister Holness or Opposition Leader Golding to your initial foray?
No, I've had no reply from either person. Let me say this. I quite deliberately confined myself to the two principal issues that were raised: the bringing home of the Constitution and the change toward a head of state appointed by the Parliament. I am in favor of nearly all the other changes that have been proposed for constitutional reform.
Listen to that, Pearnel.
They emanate from a report which I commissioned, chaired by James Sewell Carr, of blessed memory,
yes,
and pursued in a parliamentary group in which Dr. Lloyd Barnett was the main advisor to that group. What I don't want is for us to say we need to go through another process of agreement which requires dialogue, consultation, and all we're doing is kicking the can down the road.
Well, Bruce is not in favor of that either.
Let's do what we can do. No, I accept that we can't bring that change into force by the 6th of July 2022 because there's a time frame set out in the Constitution where it stipulates the time within which the bill should be laid on the table of the House before it can be debated, before it is passed, after it is debated. I would be quite content to having that done by the 6th of August, and the referendum would follow. If Mr. Golding can persuade his side to put together those other things on which there is full agreement, then a Vale Royal meeting could advance the discussion. Perhaps I want to just say here how important it is for what I call the Vale Royal approach, where both sides meet. They can sit down, they can exchange views, they can come to a consensus, rather than having everything, the dialogue taking place in Parliament, where people take
adversarial
position and nothing happens. So, to be quite plain, if we can achieve that ambitious agenda by the 6th of August, I would be among the first to say hip, hip, hooray, hallelujah, amen. But let's not make the perfection the enemy of the good. We need to do something that sets the Diamond Jubilee apart. And I think those two things which I have identified are essential for that purpose. I certainly support the other amendment, and particularly one relating to making our Caribbean Court of Justice the final court of appeal. I cannot countenance a system whereby it sits in a foreign country and those who need to have their cases heard require their counsel and the parties involved to obtain permits to enter the country,
which is now
for ventilation of those cases.
That is what now happens for Britain.
The CCJ has an excellent track record. Their cases have been examined by juries. In fact, the Privy Council itself, in its comments, said it had every reason to believe that it would prove to be a competent court.
Yes.
I still don't agree with their ruling, but I am bound to follow their ruling.
So I want to ask my friend Pearnel Charles, listening quietly as you have to both P.J. Patterson and Bruce Golding, do you detect any substantial difference between them, sir?
Well, before I get to that, I too am satisfied with what has been done. What is bothering me now is, what do we start tomorrow? In other words, we are not like Barbados.
No, but PJ has said, let's get the Vale Royal talks going. And Bruce has said, did I hear you, sir? Dust off the document and make use of the wisdom already canvassed.
Yes.
That's correct.
So one of the things that we very humbly and respectfully hope to achieve out of this exposure with both of you, which is unique, is to say, please, could that happen next week? This should be part of our Christmas experience.
Well, we need to recognize one other thing.
What other things are?
That P.J. Patterson
Yeah.
is still alive,
Yeah.
former Prime Minister,
Yes.
and is in association with the present leader.
Yes.
Bruce Golding,
Yeah.
similarly.
This is two advantages.
We have not had that for a long time.
And
guess what? Both PJ and Bruce are on the same line. So
Yes.
how do we get the other two on the line first? To start, I want to see the next generation of Jamaican saying, not only we are independent, but we have a constitution and we are a republic.
Well, I think we're getting it. I want to put to both former Prime Ministers and you, Pearnel, a letter that we've had from eminent counsel Frank Phipps. He says, I implore you, gentlemen, he's referring to you, Mr. Patterson and Mr. Golding, to share these thoughts with your listeners who will have the responsibility for a final decision on the Queen. It cannot be simply fortuitous that the Slavery Abolition Act of 1833 was passed in the same year for the Judicial Committee Act, giving former enslaved people access to Her Majesty for redress of their grievances that cannot go through the courts. Section 4 of the Judicial Committee Act of 1833, this is a British legislation, says that His Majesty may refer any other matters to the committee. It shall be lawful for His Majesty to refer to the said judicial committee for hearing or consideration of any such other matters whatsoever, as His Majesty shall think fit, and such committee shall thereupon hear, consider the same, and shall advise His Majesty in the manner aforesaid. That's the end of the quote. Mr. Phipps goes on. The Act provides the procedure for redress of a claim for reparation for slavery, a crime against humanity committed by the British in Jamaica from 1655 to 1838 that cannot go through the courts. This was no ordinary slavery. It was chattel slavery, where the enslaved became the property of the enslaver, that was made law by Barbados in 1661, later passed on to Jamaica and South Carolina. Listen to this now. When Jamaica gets rid of the Queen, as Barbados has done, we lose the right of access to our highest court of justice for compensation from Britain for wrongs committed here. And he concludes that reparation is not punishment or retaliation. It's a call on the debt owed by Britain as compensation for 200 years of enslavement. Shouldn't we pursue our own path for justice to ourselves before setting up a roadblock A petition for reparation focuses on Buckingham Palace for its goodwill towards the African diaspora, whether the monarch is disposed to make the referral to the Privy Council for advice. Importantly, it also tests the strength of judicial independence of the Privy Council for this claim against the United Kingdom government for a crime committed against humanity in Jamaica under British rule. What do you say, gentlemen?
The question that I would ask is whether or not a petition submitted to Her Majesty, whether that Her Majesty can make a decision in relation to that petition, except on the advice of her government. I don't know. PJ may be able to advise us on that.
I have the utmost respect for the opinion given by eminent counsel, but I do not concede that our moving to have a head of state of our own necessarily deprives us of the right to seek redress from the head of state for a wrong which was perpetrated by that country. I don't think it's a petition in terms of begging. I think it's an exercise for the infringement of a legal right. And the case ought to be brought, in my view, against the government of the United Kingdom, which admittedly is headed by Her Majesty the Queen. It is, as Bruce mentioned, then for the government to advise how that claim will be acted upon, whether it is a matter that they would want to have referred to the Privy Council, or a matter which is justiciable in the courts itself. I think it's a legal right which we have. It's a legal right which we should be free to exercise, whether or not the Queen is the head of state.
I think that Frank is saying, though, that as we are now,
Yes.
we would have a better chance.
He is saying that.
Right.
And
I am concerned as to whether we cut the umbilical cord, whether we can call on the mother. That separation.
Well,
and I think Dr.
PJ
Frank
is saying that he thinks that there is a separate way of doing that than this. It would be a pity if we had to keep our present arrangements in order to advance the issue of reparation. But gentlemen, may I ask, from your considerable experience, all three of you, do you think there's any possibility of the PNP and the JLP going to the country in the inevitable referendum on the same side and with the same position, rather than in antagonistic positions?
In relation to what? You mean the removal of the Queen?
The removal of the Queen and others.
They couldn't do otherwise. It's been in the party manifesto of both parties since 2002.
Okay, but
it's been proclaimed in successive sworn speeches.
Right. So here,
those since me who have been sworn in as prime ministers have in their inaugural speeches indicated that intention. So there is no room for wiggling, and I can't think of anything better than the prospect of seeing, if they decide to go in party colors, orange and green go into the country together, or if they decide to have neutral colors, for Golding and Thwaites to be going together with their team, parliamentary team and political team, advocating a single cause.
There's also a third force, you know. It's not only Golding and
Thwaites.
Who? The people.
Well, the people.
Hold on. We have seen it happen already where the people say no.
If both political parties unite,
yes,
I can't see any third or fourth force preventing the will of the people to reflect what both parties are asking them to support.
What a powerful
Can you
symbol.
imagine our canvassers going out in the field,
Yeah.
and instead of putting forward different points of view, they're all pointing to the same thing. I don't think any third force can mount that political capacity,
Mr. Patterson.
and weight, which would reverse.
Let me ask Bruce for his view.
PJ made the point earlier that, well, if the matter goes to the people, it can only go to the people one or two ways. If it has a 2/3 majority in the Senate, which means the opposition is in agreement, then when it goes to the people, there is no conflict, there is no contention. The contention would only arise if the opposition refuses to give its support for the 2/3 majority, and the government insists on putting it to the people. There's a convoluted process it has to go through. It has to come back to the Senate 2 or 3 times, remember. But when it goes to the people in that circumstance, it would require a 60% majority vote among the people. And as TJ points out, there's no vote in Jamaica that has ever recorded that kind of majority. Now, this raises another issue, though, which we need to look at. In 1961, what we had was an indicative referendum. It wasn't binding. And remember, it was won by the noes by a very slender majority.
This is the Federation.
Yeah. And they had given a commitment that he would act upon whatever decision came out of that referendum. When we're talking about amending entrenched provisions now, what goes to the people is the actual change in the Constitution that you are proposing to give effect to. There are some technical issues that are involved. There's no way that all of the questions, all of the issues that we've been discussing could be listed out in a ballot paper. The ballot paper will be 20-odd pages. So therefore, it is going to have to be put in the ballot with some kind of reference to a bill that has been passed, that is published, that people have had a chance to read and understand. One of the things that we are going to have to address is whether we put the whole of the changes in a single bill and say to the people, either accept the whole package or reject the whole package, which is what was done in St. Vincent. And the people were put in a position where if they wanted to join the CCJ, but they didn't want to leave, to get rid of the Queen, they couldn't make that choice. They had to either vote for the bill or not.
And they rejected it.
Yeah, but some of them have rejected it, may have rejected it because there was more in it that they didn't like than what they liked.
Well, this is the point.
And therefore,
this is the point. That's the point that Frank is making.
Whether or not we break it out.
Bruce, I agree with what you have said, but it is necessary to point out that in the case of St. Vincent, they had to put the CCJ by their own constitution to the people for a decision. We have no such requirement. Section 110 is a simple amendment, and this is why I have always resisted any suggestion that you have to go for a referendum in respect of the Privy Council. That's a decision that lies within the sovereign competence of the Parliament, and if 2/3 is required, as the Privy Council has ruled, then once it is accepted by 2/3 of the Senate, you are home and dry.
But listen,
and I think you have given some very excellent reasons based on their decision why it would be very hard to suggest that they don't have the competence and the learning to ensure justice for all.
it is important, however, not to clutter a reformation to the point where you're going to get all kinds of different issues impinging on some of the major questions. If you go and put in a referendum about buggery and about abortion and that kind of thing, you are going to mess up the whole thing, Bruce Golding.
So it needs that the Jamaica Labour Party has to take some strong steps maybe backward, because they have committed themselves to the nation that a referendum going to have many of these points.
Which is a statement, in my view, that means it's not going to happen. Bruce, how do we get around this?
PJ told you, Vale Royal. but
this is rich, you know.
I think
PJ told him what?
Vale Royal.
I think it's going to be important for a conversation to begin to take place, not just at Vale Royal,
Yeah.
but in various other corridors.
We're having it now, starting it.
You know, we can impinge on what the Vale Royal deliberations are prepared to focus on. You
We're
know,
going to have it on the bridge, but this is critical. But I need to ask. There is nothing that I have heard in this important discussion, this unique interchange, that indicates irreconcilable differences that can stop us from moving beyond the kind of atrophy.
I don't
you
think
seem to forget that both PJ and I are retired.
I don't think there are irreconcilable differences on the issues we have mentioned.
Yeah.
There are differences to be bridged,
Yeah.
but I think they are all within the realm of a solution. As I said, when the PMP decided no longer to pursue the path of an executive presidency and to accept that it would be a ceremonial presidency, and here I add, we have added a bit more to the ceremonial presidency by giving them some specific additional functions for new institutions we have created. But once we reached that path, the only question was, how is that person to be chosen? We are agreed that it has to be done by Parliament, and the difference is simple. Is it 2/3 of both houses or 2/3 of each house separately? And Bruce once has articulated a good reason, which has been very basic to me, why it should be 2/3 separately. You don't want a head of state whose appointment is controversial.
Yes.
You want a head of state on whom the nation is agreed, and certainly who the political leadership at the parliamentary level have all agreed.
And what do you think is the easiest way, PJ? What is the easiest way to get that agreement?
The easiest way is if we could persuade Mr. Holness and Mr. Mark Golding before Christmas to have a meeting at Vale Royal.
Lovely, and that is
to
what.
look at what the issues are.
Yeah.
They can have some festivities, a drink and some Christmas cake after. It will be a good present for the people of Jamaica that they are going to start work in January. And I pointed out something in my letter. There are lots of people who have served in doing the legal work for the reports and commissions that have already done their work. Those people can easily be assembled to bring together the particular knowledge that they have
Sure.
of what has been done so far and what remains to be done. And I believe all of them will be very happy and very honored to make a contribution to our country at this time by making their skills and experience available to assist in whatever drafting of instructions and drafting of the law are necessary.
So, gentlemen, we've really come to a point where we all agree what can happen on this very
Ronnie?
important aspect.
Ronnie, can I just put something on the record because I think it's important?
Please.
When I assumed office, I wanted to list out those items on which there was no disagreement, and to see whether or not we could move forward with those. And I actually asked a trio of people, Mr. Fiaga, Shirley Miller,
and David Core.
Okay. It wasn't David Core. I don't remember who was the other.
I think David Core.
It might have been. I asked a team of them to just list out those matters and see whether or not we could go ahead.
Really?
The position that the position that the opposition took at that time was that they were not prepared to proceed at all unless we resolve the issue of the Caribbean Court of Justice. They subsequently modified that position to allow the Charter of Rights. I put that on a record. I don't know that that would still be the position, because I kind of get a sense from PJ that, look, let's do what we can. Let's see if we can work on what is desirable, and let's move forward. But it would be a pity if that kind of condition is laid down. So I don't know whether or not that position may have changed.
Well, I hope it has been modified in the interest, if only, of getting things done. Because, gentlemen, two of us here are members of one political party and two of us are members of another. And I can listen to the audience here and abroad saying, look, you're really enlightening us on the history and the prospects of this important aspect. Yes. But for God's sake, can you get out of each other's way and our way? Is there a chance, Mr. Patterson, Mr. Golding, Mr. Charles, that the two political parties can swallow their pride and really come together to move Jamaica forward in the area of giving us a wholesome, a replete constitution that meets our needs?
Ronnie, the legal aspect of it is not the problem.
Yeah, what is the problem?
Politics.
The political. So let's
and PJ has set out the legal. Bruce is in agreement.
Sure. So I'm asking them.
What I don't know if the four of us can agree on is that whether or not the two political leaders can close the ranks.
So if we,
the politics.
Well, I'm saying and asking the question again. Yes, if we can't do that, then we know what.
No, not necessarily.
Let us not be too pessimistic. The Prime Minister has said that business of constitutional reform is going to be revisited, no? He knows that it's not something that he can do alone. So I imagine at some point in time he's going to have to pick up the phone and call Mark Golding and say, hey, we need to get together on this thing. I get the impression, certainly from a conversation that I've had with the Attorney General, that she and Delroy Chuck have been asked to sort of, shake the dust off of the discussions that took place so many years ago, bring the thing to a point where we understand where we had reached, and I'm assuming that that is preparatory to inviting the opposition to sit down and say, no, look, how can we move this thing forward? Because without the opposition, you can't go anywhere.
Well, if your assumption is correct, it would move us so far beyond where the stalemate that we have had on these and a variety of other issues, Bruce Golding, PJ Patterson, that it would be really another hallelujah, amen day. The question that the people of Jamaica, I think, are asking us, yes, no, given our history of political division, of tribalism, given our adherence to the Westminster model, is there a prospect going forward into and beyond our 60th anniversary or Diamond Jubilee for a greater level of political committee that is going to be able to advance the country in ways that are differ from the stop and start and underperformance of our first 60 years? I really crave your wisdom on this.
I'd like to say something very simple. The Constitution was crafted at a time and in a situation where neither of the heads of the two political parties could be certain who would be the Prime Minister and who would be the leader of the opposition after the Constitution and for an independent Jamaica. And so it is based on a system of balance. And the relationship between the leader of the opposition and the leader of the government, the head of the government, the nature of that relationship is very, very important. You can move when they have a good working relationship. If they don't, they must appoint emissaries who have their confidence, who have that kind of relationship. I don't know that the personal chemistry right now is not self-evident between the two. Perhaps it can be lubricated, but
but I resent. I resent the fact that you're probably right, sir. But is it appropriate? Let me take back the words I used earlier. Is it appropriate that the fortunes of the people of this country? Yes, Pearnel Charles and I sit down every day, and he remarks upon the roadblock that political pride plays in keeping us back in many respects. Not all, but in many respects. And I can't believe that the personal chemistry between two leaders can be the deciding factor there. We have to develop a system that is going to prevent that.
Yeah, but see, Ronnie, the chemistry between the two is stimulated by the ingredients that develop individual chemistry.
Yeah.
So, in other words, when Mark come before to sit, he has to talk to who is behind him. You understand? So the ingredients, the politics is the problem.
Don't lead me to a stalemate. Don't lead me to a stalemate. Bruce Golding, save the day. What can bring the two political tendencies together so that we can achieve?
I can start to suggest. Bruce and PJ a major stimulus in whatever going to be needed in this chemistry.
Go ahead, PJ.
Michael and Eddie had the political will to see it happen.
Here you know.
So, just a minute. For it to happen, they had to delegate the authority to myself on the one hand and to Hugh Shearer and Bruce Golding to work to make it happen.
You're making
That's
your point,
what I mean by personal chemistry. If it had been left to them two and two alone, it wouldn't and it couldn't have happened. They had to find people with whom they had trust, with whom they had authority to do the work with the kind of personal chemistry which I think is essential. Yeah. And they had to give the political imprimatur as leaders to make it a reality. It's exactly the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah.
And I was identifying it because if there was no Hugh Shearer and Michael Manley,
things would have happened. Bruce, you were finishing a point.
Yeah, you raised something earlier about the urgency of now.
Yes.
From start to finish, taking into account the statutorily required period in the legislature, the public education program. I remember after it leaves the legislature, it can't go to the people before a minimum of 2 months as elect. There has to be a period of public education. Then the referendum is held. I think to be comfortable, you're looking at 18 months. From we start serious discussion to the point where a referendum is held.
Yes.
We are at the end of the first year of the current term of office of the government. A year and a half would put us midway.
Yes.
Once you get beyond midway, you begin to get into the election
politics
season
of
again.
The politics of it.
So if we don't start early, this thing is going to be capsized
Yes.
by the rumblings of another election.
Well, listen, this is so clear. The imperatives are so well stated. This discussion is pathfinding. We have an agenda. Before we go, and I have the permission to carry us over 2:00. Thank you very much for the bridge and the program we're interrupting. But gentlemen, both of you separately have spoken long time and presently about the issue of reviving a campaign, a new set of values and attitudes in this country, a revival of social capital. Bruce, you were bold enough to say recently that the campaign started by PJ Patterson had been derailed because of partisan considerations, I think. What can we do jointly to revive that jointure, that unity on something that is so absolutely necessary? Any thoughts?
I believe it can be done. I don't know. PJ can speak for himself. I don't know whether in hindsight, at the time when he launched the program, it appeared to have been a government initiative. Maybe if it had been done as a sort of national effort that involved, all the stakeholders, the civil society, and so on. But be that as it may, that's the approach that I believe would have to be taken now. Certainly, the government is going to be critical. The opposition is going to be critical. But I think we'll have to bring in a broader range of stakeholders to make this thing a really national thing, to carefully design what the objectives are, how we're going to go about it, and what are the resources that we're going to need behind it. Because sometimes I wonder, and I hope I'm wrong, but I wonder whether or not we may not have to draw a line in the sand, whether we may not have to say, well, look, there's a generation or two generations that have gone ahead that we're not going to be able to get them into that quality of mind. Maybe we need to start making sure that the generation that will be out there as adults in another 15, 20 years have a different mindset and approach the business of nationhood, of community in a different way. I'm not suggesting that we should give up on those who are around now, but I think emphasis is going to have to be put on building a brand new Jamaican for the future.
I made a point earlier, and I don't want to be misunderstood outside, that I know that Hugh Shearer had confidence of Siaga and the friendship of Michael Manley. And he was a major stimulant.
Got your point.
And that's why I said that Bruce and PJ, the role they can play between these two leaders, because I am not going to fool myself. I'm a student of politics. And I'm telling you that the only problem that is before us now with this thing is not the law, because the Frank Phipps and the PJs
what a challenge, but what a disappointment.
Politics. Yeah, but face it.
Not arguing that point. We understand your point.
Face it.
Yes.
But if we have, I know, as I said, we are fortunate. I think that the Bruce and the PJ and the others.
It begs the question. It begs the question that we have to ask them: are they prepared to
help in this?
To help to harness together in this?
That they should have gotten done when they were the prime ministers.
I can't say that, Mr. Patterson. What's your thoughts, sir?
It's very difficult, very painful for me to comment on this, but a great deal of time was spent in preparing for the launch of the program.
The values and attitudes
and to ensure that it was national in appeal. To the very first meeting, the Governor General would be in attendance. Provisions were made for the leader of the opposition to be a speaker and an active participant. All the political parties, including some who did not have any representation in Parliament, were invited. The private sector was there. The NGO community was there. The trade unions were there.
Church.
Young people were there. The church was there. We had workshops which made recommendations. Several of those recommendations were acted upon. We had parish consultation, 4 of them, with good participation. But in Jamaica, as we say, one hand can't clap. Unfortunately, we were at an impossible handicap from the very start, when unfortunately on the day we were notified that Mr. Thiago would not be in attendance, and there was a release on the following day saying that it was intended to be for partisan reasons. Well, that's happened. It's very unfortunate. We've lost a lot of time. And quite frankly, we are further on the brink of a precipice than we could have anticipated at the time. I have said since that if the 2 political leaders, again, I'm going back to Vale Royal, call upon those of us who have retired to help in any way we can help. Bruce has said it on several occasions. I remember at a meeting launched by the private sector on the stock exchange, and he's repeated it. I am still willing to give any help I can, but we have to do something. I want to accept the point made by Bruce. This is a new generation. Some of the things which we hold sacred no longer have the same veneration. We can't impose on the people something which does not accord with their norms and their aspirations. But there is no society in the world that can survive if it doesn't have a sense of what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. The thing with the crime is it ranges from the most despicable to the most trivial of occasions. When you read the transcript of the trials that are taking place for gangs, admittedly, the witnesses, the star witnesses are themselves criminals. But it's revealing something that's happening in the country that will show that no government can handle it unless there's some basic change. We saw the atrocities of Montego Bay. We have to re-examine the role of the church, the role of the school, the role of our communities, the role of our political parties in this process, the role of our entertainers. I keep on reminding everybody, the great Bob Marley, the great Jimmy Cliff, not one of them have a song that's filthy, that's demeaning of other human beings. We have achieved too much as a people. We have too many reasons to be proud as a people for this degeneration of our standards and our values continuing. If we don't find a way of arresting it, unfortunately, we are not going to achieve our dreams of Jamaica as a place where people are able, as the Vision 2030 says, to live by choice in peace and security, to raise families and become a prosperous nation.
Thank you for that.
I think if you are Jamaican, a real Jamaican, and that includes the people in the diaspora, who I know value
their Jamaicanness.
And there are many.
We will have to join in there.
There are many people in the diaspora.
Yes.
And there are many people listening to us now who say, what is all of this? How come Barbados can just get up overnight and become a republic? What happened to us? And you need to really set out. I hope that they understand that Barbados is a completely different situation than what we have.
Well, it may be so, but Bruce, is it because Mia has all the seats in Parliament?
Well,
That's one.
Well, no, not necessarily. I mean, in the case of Barbados, as far as I recall, first of all, they don't need a referendum.
That's right.
And secondly, the question of becoming a republic is a matter on which, for many years, both government and opposition in Barbados have been at one. Why previous prime ministers didn't decide to do it, I don't know. But their process is a little easier. But to respond to Pearnel's point, Barbados did it because they decided that this is what they wanted to do. We decided that this is what we wanted to do a long time ago. Let's do it.
I agree. I have a last word for both, or ask a last word from both of you before we part. A lot of people in the diaspora are listening to this program. This station is aptly named The Bridge. The idea is there are two objectives. One is to reach out and communicate between Jamaicans and Jamaican lovers all over the world. And secondly, is to use that method of communication to try and bridge some of the differences, some of the ascriptive chasms that we have created for ourselves. When they listen to this discussion about constitutional change, when they hear all of the nuances of history and prospect, what's a good word for them? What is the word of faith or continuing hope that Bruce Golding and PJ Patterson would like to leave with them?
I think we have engaged a conversation. I think that because our conversation has involved PJ and myself, I believe that it is.
Look at that now, Pearnel.
It is going to carry some weight. Mm-hmm. I believe that we need to invite the diaspora to become engaged in that conversation as well, because they have a great deal of influence in terms of how leaders think. Leaders spend a lot of time abroad trying to whip up their support because they have influence with their families back here when election time comes. So,
man, they're financing the country right now, sir.
That's right. That's right. So I think it's important for us to get enlarge the conversation,
yes,
and keep it going.
Good. PJ Patterson, a thought?
In my closing years of life, I have decided to concentrate my efforts in seeking to build a bridge between the people of Africa, the people of the Caribbean, and the diaspora. And we're placing greater emphasis on the diaspora than ever before because we recognize the challenges which they face at this time in the political transformation which is taking place in the countries where they reside. And we also recognize their tremendous love for their homeland and the awesome contribution that they have been making, not only to families, but to schools and to other deserving institutions. And we believe that those energies which are generated in the diaspora have to be part and parcel of helping us deal with the challenges that we face in their homeland. I don't want you to exaggerate the capacity, certainly of myself, to determine what the party to which I belong does or doesn't do. They speak for themselves. The views I give are my own. There's a difficulty I face. Whenever you come up with something, people ask why you didn't do it in your time.
Yeah.
Or they see purely through partisan lens. One of the things about retirement, being in the pavilion, as Mr. Shearer would say, you can see things clearly without the taint of immediate partisan consideration. And whatever I can do my own way for the country to which I belong, to the Caribbean of which I'm a part, and to Africa from which I originate. That's how I intend to expend whatever energies remain within me.
Ronnie, all four of us have spent more than 2 terms in the parliament.
Yes.
All 4 of us have been in the front line of our political parties. And the 4 of us right here are speaking as one now.
Yes.
And I'm saying I want to go one step further, that there's a generation that has not been involved in the PNP and the JLP as we have.
Yes.
And they are looking for a different approach to the solutions of our problem. And as I have said, we have no legal problem now.
Yes.
The problem we have is the politics.
What I've heard today,
and we want to say the politics have changed, has to come to solve the problem.
What I've heard today is an insight into how that can take place and some commitments to assist in that process, which is all we can. There's never been a discussion like this before. PJ Patterson and Bruce Golding, we thank you very much for your company and bespeak your presence in the future as we advance this process of national unification, and particularly around the imminent area of constitutional reform. Much obliged to you both.
Thank you, Ronnie. Thank you, Pearnel.
Thank you.
Right Honourable P.J. Patterson, the Honourable Bruce Golding, Prime Ministers of Jamaica, on the public eye and the bridge. Can we take a short break and then can we come back, and Pearnel and I, we need to spend just a few minutes of trespassing on Nikki Z's time to analyze and assess what we've done. It's historic. Pearnel Charles, let's summarize this in the few minutes that we have left to trespass.
Well, my first statement is that Jamaica is still here, and we are still bright, we are still happy with all the problems that we have around us. We have people, whether it's in the Frank Phipps legal field or in the PJ and Bruce political field, or you and I, we represent something that is different from, well, the shooting and flinging at each other.
Boy, you're right. I hope, and we're grateful for that. Pearnel Charles, today, in my view, we cemented some ground that had already been broken. There was no fundamental difference on what is the constitutional foundation of our nation between Bruce Golding, JLP former Prime Minister, and PJ Patterson, a former PNP Prime Minister. If we don't make some use of that and get over ourselves and make use of the fact that there is a fair measure of consensus and a spirit of accommodation, both things, a fair measure of agreement already in place from what both of them said,
Yes.
and a spirit of accommodation. Both of them express willingness as far as they can to influence, to help. You put the question, yes, the crucial question to them more than once. To me, we are our own fools if we fail to take up that now. Before Christmas, Andrew Holness and Mark Golding must sit down. The public of this country, represented, albeit partially, but with some validity by the four of us today, are saying that nicely, politely, but resolutely. It can't stop. Yes, it cannot stop in this way. And whatever the personal chemistry, to use that your phrase, whatever the need for accommodation that has to take place, we owe it to our people to do it. Bruce Golding spoke about the generations who we've missed, if you will. The only way that they can be restored, or we have any credibility with those yet to be influenced, is if we stop just mousing around each other, but get on with the task of finding viable means of political and operational unity in this country. Tell me I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, you're right. As far as I'm concerned,
Tired with the nice language now.
no,
Come
as
and
far
use
as
that.
I'm concerned, Ronnie, we are not very far from getting there, but the pit is deep.
Yeah, but you see, again, we have said this so
And
many times.
we must not allow the emotion
Yeah.
to carry us, beyond the reality.
Yeah. But the reality,
As Bruce has said it, the closer we get to election,
yes.
the harder it is for them to look as to who will win the next
So
election.
we have a year and a half.
Yeah.
Yes, and anybody who wants to win an election with a constitution which is clearly inadequate, with a system of derivative behavior, we also discuss values and attitudes, which is unserviceable to take us for the future. Anybody who wants to preside over that scorched earth country, let them go on. Well, I don't really mean that. You were correct in your remark afterwards. The thing we didn't touch with them, the critical element, is only 30% bothered to vote at all.
Exactly.
Last time. Okay? So what happened? We want to make that go lower?
No.
Because we sit down on our pump and pride and say
let
no?
me tell you what to do.
Hey.
We know why the people stopped voting in Jamaica. We must make that assessment.
Well, one of the reasons is a lot of people
Feel that
nothing in there.
getting nothing night for me.
Well, exactly. And that's why I asked, what is
And
in it for the diaspora?
there's a generation
Yeah.
that feel that an independent Jamaica
Yeah.
means much more to them than many of us in the past.
Right.
So there is a way of going forward. And I said both Bruce
Yeah.
and PJ can play that major role that I know Hugh Lawson Shearer play between Michael Manley and Edward Seale.
And I'm conceding that, but I am saying that the liberty and the future of our people, their very lifeblood, yes, to conquer the three huge C's, ABC, of pandemics of our time, crime, COVID, and corruption, yes, cannot only depend upon some mediator in between two warring tribes. It can't go so. People must fix their face or they must come out.
Yes, but then you're going to have somebody say it's your fault.
Fine.
It's not my fault,
Well,
it's your fault.
PJ Patterson agreed, assessed that, and he gave a very honest that when you're out, when you're at a different distance from it, you see more clearly. Yes. When somebody says, "But why you never do it?" It is the weakest argument. It's no rebuttal at all. Yes. Because
the generation that I am talking about don't have time to go back into those foolishness that kept us back so strongly.
Yes.
That chain, they're going to break it and move forward.
I want to thank you and commend the station, and appreciate the forbearance.
We don't have our New York man yet.
Yes, he's listening, but I don't think we're hearing him. But we want to thank him and the audience at Harry Jam for their participation in what has been a historic venture on broadcasting today. Thanks very much to the Honourable P.J. Patterson, former Prime Minister of Jamaica, the Honourable Bruce Golding, equally formerly Prime Minister of Jamaica, to you, Pearnel Charles Sr., thanks to all the Public Eye and Open Mind Bridge Nation listeners, thanks to LaFane Wigan, to Richie Rainford, to to Sean, Romy, all of the technical staff who have tried so hard to make today a success. We're going to do this in the future, you know. We're onto this direction. We have a pilgrimage ahead of us. The objective is to bring Jamaicans together, not just physically, not just by communication, not just to be enthused by music, but in the common cause of rising up our nation. Rise Up is on one of our programs, and all the other ventures that come on Bridge 99 today. Thanks for the extra time. All the best. See you soon.